that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the world of Malazan, or Malazan. However it's meant to be said, I don't actually care. Today I have for you Korbal, Broach, and Bauchelian adventures, yet again, with the Crackpot Trail by Steven Erickson. Now here's the thing, I don't have that many spoilers, and I can't really talk about this story. It really behooves you to know nothing, or practically nothing, going in. Here's what I'll say. It does take place after that first collection of 3 short stories. It does take place after Worms of Blear's Mouth. It does take place after Memories of Ice, of course. There is a group of artists and fans and critics and some knights, for good measure, and some other people. And they are, in their caravans heading to a destination. However, they've run out of food. And they're not going to get to their destination on the time they thought they would. Well, it's not going to be that much longer. But as these books are always comedy, dark comedy, satire, and other things, they resort to cannibalism, even though they definitely didn't need to. Plot-wise, that's about that, without getting into spoilers. And there's a lot of fun just within that. But this story is so much more than that. I have a slight spoiler to mention, but I'll do that near the end. Because I think it's a slight spoiler in terms of it's not going to ruin your enjoyment of the story, I think, completely. Some other YouTubers think differently. But I think if you're going to spend your hard-earned money for this, you really need to know what you're getting into. I know part of the fun is not knowing anything. But, the Korbal, Broach, and Bauchelian stories haven't been for everyone anyway. On top of the fact with this one in particular. So there is something that, if you don't mind a slight spoiler, I think it will behoove you if you're going to spend your hard-earned money on this. But we'll get to that. But this story is so much more than just the plot summary I gave you, because this is really a meta story on a lot of different things. On death of the author, to critics, to fans, and authors being appreciated versus, can you even be appreciated without an audience? You're just speaking to the void. And it's a big meta satire on a lot of those things. This is really a story, if you love Steven Erickson and you love his writing, above all else, above even the stories that he's telling within the Malazan world, or the characters within it, if you are a fan of Steven Erickson's prose and the way that he writes his literature, then you're going to love this. If you're here for a super... The main plot's not the point. There is a main plot, but that's not really the point. The substance comes from everything else surrounding the journey, if that makes sense. Now, I, as someone who appreciates prose and writing and stuff, even though I'm no expert myself, who am I to... And I've said this before for years now, when I've reviewed anything. Who am I to talk about books? And that's part of the thing with this very story. Who am I to say anything about any of these stories when I've never written anything in my life? I've never written a story. I've never published a book. So who am I to critique somebody else's art when I haven't done the same as them? But then do you need to do the same thing in order to critique it? If I eat a fish and it's cooked raw and it isn't sushi, Am I not allowed to say that it is cooked improperly just because I didn't cook the fish? Or because I haven't cooked fish in the past? There's multiple layers here, and I'm probably doing a way poorer job than Steven Erickson obviously does in this story. But I'm no expert, and I'm no pro. Who am I to judge literature? But then if I don't, whether there's critics or not, professional or otherwise, you need an audience. So inevitably, people are going to talk about it. So it's part of the fun. But I loved it. I love Steven Erickson's writing, so I didn't mind the fact there are certain elements in here that might disappoint some people. And again, I'm getting into slight spoilers in a little bit, but if you love Steven Erickson, if you love his writing, then you're going to enjoy this story. And I think that's the most I can say non-spoiler wise. I really don't have that many spoilers for you. One thing I'll say that's not really a spoiler, but something cool for you to know, and maybe something to envision in your mind as you go through the story. On YouTube, there are two wonderful people who I have watched very much a lot as I've been getting into Malazan, Book of the Fallen, and all of Asimov's works. I've been listening to on Spotify the 10 Very Big Books podcast, which is definitely something worth listening to as well as Philip Chase, who's written his own trilogy, by the way, which you should definitely check out, but also A.P. Cameron, who is known as A Critical Dragon on YouTube. And he talks about storytelling, he talks about how to be a better reader, writing stuff, story analysis, and a whole bunch of other things like that. It's really great. It's very informative. It's like basically having like a college course for free. So if you just want to be, if reading is just a hobby for you and you want something a little bit more, you want to have a little bit more substance to your, even if just reading privately, or you do like good books reviews or whatever, good reads or whatever, it would behoove you to check him out. But I mention him not just to shamelessly plug someone that I like, but because there is a character named Apto Canivlian, something like that. But that is an anagram for A.P. Cameron. So if you check out his channel, if nothing else, just to hear his voice, see his face, so that way when you read this story, you can kind of picture him in there. But I noticed that as reading it, and then I looked up if he did a discussion about this, and they very much did confirm that that was him. So that wasn't my slight spoiler thing, but I just thought that was something cool for you to know going into it. But yeah, do I personally recommend it? Yes. Do I think this is for everyone? No. And that's all I can say there. Take it or leave it. It's your money. Do as you wish. Or get it at a library or something if they have it. So you don't have to spend your money. I don't know. Borrow it from a friend. Check it out for yourself. But I do recommend it. All right, my slight spoiler. Okay? And again, this is for you if you're like, do I want to purchase this? This is what I have to tell you. Okay? Bauchelian and Korbal and Emancipator Reese are not in the story. They're at the very end, but they're not in this story. This is all about these other new people, new characters. But part of the thing about not knowing going into it is that you expect them to show up. So you have this own story, because again, death of the author as well. You, as you read any sort of story, or watch a story, or play a video game, the moment that comes out into the ether, into the public space, it is no longer just yours. People derive their own meaning from the text themselves, which is separate from author intent within that. Which, of course, you can have, obviously, there are certain interpretations that just don't work. And this is something that A Critical Dragon's talked about. If you are reading a story, and the story clearly says, Alex went into an orange pickup truck and drove off to work, you cannot then interpret from the text, he drove in a red Honda and went to work. Or drove in a red Honda and went to his girlfriend's house. Right? Because that's not, within the text, that's not something you can interpret from. It's very clear on what you were meant to get from that. So you would be reading the text incorrectly. However, within any given text, so long as it is not outright contradicted by any given statement within it, right? There is room there for a sort of interpretation to form. It may be exactly what somebody else envisions. It may be something completely different. But that's sort of the thing with literature and with fiction in general. That's kind of how that plays out. You know, I can watch the same show or the same two actors do the same two things, and me and another person will watch the same scene and feel two completely different emotions coming off of it. You know? So, again, death of the author. With that, so the first time you read this, you know, if you don't have any spoilers in, you know, if you haven't gotten this far into my review, then you expect Bauchelian and Korbal and Emancipator Reese to show up at some point, or for them to already have been there in some weird plot twist. So you're already forming something in your brain. Maybe they're all doing cannibalism because of Bauchelian and Korbal. Like, you just don't know. Like, there's so many things that could go through your head that you are thinking as you go throughout the story, only to realize that they're not in it at all. But that's a completely different experience from knowing, as you do now, if you came this far, that they're not a part of the story at all, and that they had nothing to do with this story at all. So, you know, and I understand why, you know, that's part of the fun. I don't want to ruin that for people, but at the same time, if you're buying these books, if you're buying these stories because you want more fun with these two characters, then I also think it's important for you to know what you're getting into, what you're spending your hard-earned money on that you have to work for, you know, slave away every week for, you know. So I feel like it's important for you to know that they're just not there. But some people are just going to want the mystery, and that it probably is a better reading experience, but also maybe they're willing to throw their money away faster than I am. So I just thought that was important for everyone to know. Other than that, I really don't have many spoilers. It's a really fun tale. There's a lot of things I could dive into, but many other people, like A Critical Dragon and Philip Chase and other people, have done this better than I could ever hope to anyway. So, by and large, though, it really makes you think, and it's a lot of fun, and the prose continue to be excellent. I love Steven Erickson's writing. I don't always agree with some of the views. Like, you know, when I read the books, there's very much a... I know it's not trying to tell you. He's much better at it than I think a lot of people today are when it comes to having your own opinion, while also, you know, making it so it's like he's not shoving it down your throat. And he does do a very good job of that, but it's still very clearly, a lot of times, like, religion bad. It's a lot more nuanced than that, but a lot of times it's just that and stuff. So there's a lot of things, not in this story, I just mean in general, like, there are certain things that I don't necessarily agree with Steven Erickson on when I read it, or at least completely and utterly. But I still love the thought and intelligence that goes behind, from his main series to this weird spin-off thing. Like, there's always more to it than meets the eye. Nothing is made... I mean, everything's made for fun. I mean, otherwise, why would he write it? But everything has a purpose, you know? And it is a joy to read, for me personally. And if you're a fan of Steven Erickson's writing, I think you're going to be too. And, you know, I could go, like, more in-depth about what this plot is about, but really, you just experiencing it. Just enjoy it, you know? Don't rush through it. Don't try to make it, you know, got to get to the next Korbal, Broach, and Bauchelian story. Just enjoy the ride. It's not very long. You could probably finish it in like an hour or two, maybe 3, you know, and just have fun, you know. Let your brain think for a bit, you know. And I think that's the best way to go about it. And yeah, I always feel smarter after reading Steven Erickson, you know. But, no, it was a great fun, and I hope you check it out. I just want to make sure that for the people that are going to be slightly spoiled, that, you know, if you're spending your money, that you know that. I think that's important to know. Because, in a sense, we tricked ourselves, but it also is a little bit of a trick on Steven Erickson's part. I mean, it says, I guess the Bauchelian and Korbal was at the bottom of the text, whereas the Crackpot Trail was at the very top, so, you know. But still, I think it's a little bit. Like, if you story with Spider-Man on the cover, but it's not called Spider-Man, it's called MJ. Yeah, but you have Spider-Man on the cover, so I expect him to be in the majority of the story, right? But even if it's from MJ's perspective. Regardless, worth your time. Check it out at some point. And yeah, up next, just because I want to finish them off, and because my heart's still breaking from Reaper's Gale. So before I jump into Toll the Hounds, Fiends of Nightmaria, or whatever it's called, Bauchelian and Korbal, where they will actually be a part of the story again. Even though in most of these, you know, stories, they're usually like secondary characters to the main characters of any given short story. This just happened to be one where they just only pop up at the very end, which is unusual for most of these stories. But yeah, check it out. Worth your time. I'll see you in that next one. Till then, bye-bye.